Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes. And with me, as always, is my friend and colleague in the ideographic world, Mr. Kenneth Kelly.
It's great to be here, Rory, and it's great to be back on the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Just loving that you guys are loving it, to be honest with you. Loving the feedback we're seeing on the Facebook page. Thank you so much. And I really mean this genuinely for all the reviews that you're putting on iTunes as well. It's just showing that it's worth us spending our time here, Rory, in this, what is it, an ideographic, what?
Ideographic. It means the study of single experience, and we're going to be talking about that today through, certainly in the next section when we're talking about Ask Ken and Rory, and certainly in skills and indeed theory, where we're going to be looking at phenomenology.
Oh my goodness. I know, when you say that word, Rory and I have been saying the word phenomenology, just practicing it so that we can say it without tripping over our tongues before the podcast. And it really just kicks off that do phenomenology. Do. So that's what we're going to be covering in theory today. In skills, I'm going to be exploring the appropriate use of questions. I know that questions can be quite damaging if used inappropriately in a skills session, and they can be really valuable when they are used correctly. So we're going to be looking at where we can trip ourselves up with questions and how to use them for the best benefit of the client. But of course, we kick off, as we always do, by taking something from the Facebook page. And what have we got this week, Rory?
Well, we've got a request from a listener and poster, Isaiah Palm, and he's from Alberta in Canada. So we welcome an international listener, and our friends and colleagues across the world listen to our podcast. So he's written, and he writes this: I want to take a minute to ask a question about counselling. I have noticed that I find it challenging to balance client needs when they come in and want results fast, effectively putting pressure on me as a clinician to perform quickly and efficiently. My process when this happens is to describe the counselling process and how I need to assess, how I need to understand their concerns using my knowledge and expertise before giving them interventions. I have found these clients understand but are reluctant to go into detail and depth, and thus hindering my assessment. Yeah. It says here our assessment, but I think it's assessment.
I think you got that one right there, Rory. And I can really relate to what you're saying there, that there are certain clients who come in and they're coming in looking for solutions. And it's understandable. Why wouldn't they come in looking for a solution? They may be feeling pain, discomfort, or find that life is becoming unmanageable for them. So they come to speak to a counsellor, because counsellors have the answers. Counsellors are going to tell them what to do. Counsellors are going to give them the solutions. That is maybe a way that we are perceived, but I guess it's a little different when we go and study and we learn what counselling truly is. And I liked what Isaiah said, in that he tries to explain the counselling process to the person that is presenting.
Yes, absolutely. And Isaiah goes on to say that he is his predominant modality is CBT, and he uses solution-focused therapy and narrative questioning, which is the kind of therapy you'd see maybe in family situations. Yep. Narrative questioning, finding out the story. And it does put people under pressure. And I'm also aware, Ken, that people other than therapists listen to this podcast. So there may be some people who are thinking of going to counselling, listening to this and thinking, I'm really frightened of telling my story to the counsellor, because clients can come with shame, fear, rejection. They could come with all sorts of stuff, and they may be frightened to speak about it. They may be frightened of being judged. They may be frightened of just going back there. Yeah. And such, I think one of the things that a good counsellor should do is just wait. And I want to tell my story about John Shlien, if I can.
Oh, yeah.
John Shlien was a person-centered therapist in America. I think he died in around 2002. He was a student of Carl Rogers. And he would tell a story that every year he would go to a field near where he lived and watch the poppies opening. It was a huge poppy field. And he said he could force the poppies apart and see the beauty inside, but he damaged the leaves.
Yeah.
So he would spend time and he'd go up every day and wait, and he would be rewarded with that patience by the poppy slowly opening, sometimes actually in front of him, and see the beauty that's inside. And he went on to talk about his principles of therapy. And one of those principles was that everybody knows everything. We may have denials, cover-ups, lapses of memory, but we are the ultimate source. And that's a very phenomenological idea. The idea that clients actually probably know what's hurting. Rogers said that. But maybe we need to be patient and allow them to find that courage and maybe find that space to share what's really going on for them.
I love that. And I love the analogy of the flower, because it is so true. It is about patience, and it is about allowing the client to get there in their own time. And here's the truth. I mean, you really touched on it powerfully there, Rory. People are coming in with really heavy stuff that they end up seeing a counsellor because of heavy stuff. And heavy stuff involves pain, specifically going back there. It's not pleasant. It's the last place they want to go and sit in that pain and experience that pain. And it's our bread and butter. It's where we work as counsellors, in the trenches, in that pain. But it's about the client feeling comfortable and safe and prized enough to be able to go there at their pace. And it is about patience for us, not kind of willing them or nudging them along to that pain or trying to get them to go to it, maybe inviting them and letting them know that we will be there should they choose to go there. But it has to be at their pace, certainly in person-centered counselling, which I guess is less solution-focused and more about being with the person as they find their own way.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'd say, Isaiah, is that some clients may need a longer term engagement. Those clients who've got historic issues of neglect or abuse in their past, in their childhood, may very well need a longer term engagement. And the same goes for clients who may have borderline personality disorder. They may need a longer, more supportive engagement. So it really is, I think, all about the assessment. And certainly when I'm teaching my students, I say get a good handle, if you can, on what the presented issue is. And if it's something that you feel may need a different approach, maybe a psychodynamic approach, it may be just a longer series of sessions. And we have to remember that when Aaron Beck made CBT or designed it, he designed it not for 6 or 8 sessions. He designed it for a really longer term engagement. And it's just that healthcare providers around the world decided they're going to do it in blocks of 6 or 8. Sometimes, and I'll be really honest, I think for things like historic abuse and for neglect, CBT really may not be that useful. You may be able to kind of get people to manage, but you won't get them to heal.
Very, very good point there, Rory. And I guess just as we come to the end of this topic, the other side of this is how you feel as a practitioner. If the client is coming in with an urgency to find a solution and expecting you to give all the answers, how does that make you feel as a practitioner, as a counsellor? Because that's about self. That's about exploring self and exploring if discomfort does come in, or if you do feel the power of urgency to move faster or to do something out of what you would normally do for the client. That's worth taking to supervision, maybe speaking to your peers about, and exploring yourself around that, because there is a clear transference of their needs and they're wishing to rush and reach a solution which is leaking onto you as the practitioner.
Absolutely. And the other thing to consider is maybe that in the client's history, there has been a sense that they fail. And maybe that is a place that they know well, failing. And by setting you up to fail, they revisit this kind of safe space where they could go away and they can say, well, even the therapist can't help me. And this is where patience and really focusing, and as Kenny's going to look at use of really good questions later on, it helps kind of open the clients up to themselves and allows them to explore their own processes. And all of this, in my view, is around them feeling valued in the world.
I love it. I really do. I think that's so well explained. And hopefully that is helpful to you listening to this. hopefully it's helpful to everyone listening to this. I got something out of just debating it and chatting it through, Rory, and that's what it's all about. Go and speak to your peers about this and bring it up in your discussion groups, in your learning institutions. Very, very good question. And we want to hear more of your questions. We want to hear more of the topics that you want to hear about, and you can do that by just asking them on our Facebook feed. Facebook feed is easy to find. If you just go to Facebook and type in Counselling Tutor, we're going to come up right at the top because that's the name of our group. But you can also find us by going to our website, www.counsellingtutor.com. Click on the Facebook tab, which is right at the top on the right-hand side, and you'll be in. We'll let you in. We'll open the door. It is a closed group because we want to keep it for students of counselling, but if you knock on the door, we're going to let you in. So moving on from that onto theory with Rory today, and Rory is going to be delving into the interesting world that is our phenomenological world that is unique to each and every one of us.
That's right, Ken. Phenomenology is a position in philosophy, and it underpins all of the modern therapies. It underpins TA, it underpins Gestalt, it underpins person-centered approach, humanistic approaches. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what phenomenology is and tell you a little bit about why it's important, and in quoting a bit of Mr. Rogers as well, who was a big reader of phenomenology.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
Experience is for me the highest authority. The touchstone of validity is my own experience. No other person's ideas and none of my own ideas are as authoritative as my own experience. It is to experience that I must return again and again to discover a closer approximation to the truth as it is in the process of becoming in me. Neither the Bible nor the prophets, neither Freud nor research, neither the revelations of God nor man can take precedence over my own direct experience. With this quote from the book On Becoming a Person, published in 1951, psychologist and founder of person-centered therapy, Carl Ransom Rogers, introduced a new lexicon of ideas into the field of counselling: phenomenology, the structure of experience or consciousness. The historical movement of phenomenology was developed in the first half of the 20th century by philosophers and thinkers such as Edmund Husserl, Martin Heidegger, Maurice Merleau-Ponty and Jean Paul Sartre, to name a few, although the basic ideas can be traced back to the Greek philosopher Plato. More of that as we move along. It was the German philosopher Edmund Husserl who developed a set of ideas which is sometimes referred to as descriptive psychology, the study of experience or consciousness as experienced from your point of view, sometimes referred to as your frame of reference, and includes perceptions, habits, social practices, language and feelings. So why is phenomenology such an important philosophical component in therapies such as Gestalt, transactional analysis and humanistic approaches? The answer, as always, lies with our clients. They come to us to share their stories, and by doing so, help them find a way of accepting or moving away from difficulties they experience. As therapists, we work with the client's worldview, relationships, concepts of self and others. Using empathy, we try to enter the client's frame of reference and see the world as they see it. In these times of empathic connection, we are sharing phenomenological moments as we too experience the client's worldview as they see, hear or feel it. This is especially true in Gestalt psychotherapy, where the therapist not only helps the client explore thoughts and feelings, but works with how the body processes traumatic events and past experiences, both consciously and subconsciously. Another interesting paradox is that sometimes clients believe that the messages they have received from others are a true reflection of themselves. This is particularly true for some survivors of abuse who believe that they had brought it on themselves or it was their fault. In cases like this, their phenomenological view of the world has been distorted by the abuser or those who wrongly believe that those who've been abused were asking for it. Rogers was well aware of these contradictions. Remember the quote from the beginning? Well, there is a paragraph missing at the end, and it reads, "My experience is not authoritative because it's infallible. It is the basis of authority. It can be checked in new and primary ways. It's this way, its frequent error or fallibility is always open to correction." And to illustrate this, I'm going to tell a little story known as Plato's Caves, developed and an analogy by Plato, the philosopher. Imagine several prisoners who have been chained up in a cave all of their lives, and they've never been outside the cave. They face the wall of the cave and can never look at the entrance of the cave. Sometimes animals, birds or people or other objects pass by the entrance of the cave, casting a shadow on the wall inside the cave. The prisoners see the shadow on the wall and mistakenly view the shadows as reality. So that's their phenomenological reality. However, one man breaks free from his chains and runs out of the cave. For the first time, he sees the real world and now knows that it's far beyond the shadows he'd been seeing. He sees real birds, real animals, not just shadows of birds and animals. The man is excited about what he sees and goes back to his fellow prisoners in the cave to tell them about the real world. But to his astonishment, they don't believe him. In fact, they are angry with him. They say the shadows are reality and that the escaped prisoner is crazy for saying otherwise. In other words, sometimes our sense of something may not be the reality of this situation. We may need to seek a different perspective on events. In cases like this, a counsellor may very well gently challenge the client by asking them to consider a different perspective and offer support as the client moves from one reality to another, a process known as osmotic change.
A really interesting topic there, Rory. And what I like is where Rogers, in his 19 propositions, he refers often to the phenomenological field, phenomenology, and it's just great to get, I guess, better insight into it. So thanks for that.
Absolutely, and it underpins, as I say, a lot of the therapies, but it forms a key component of person-centered therapy. So, Ken, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What are you going to be doing in skills today?
You see, the first question was a closed question. The second one was an open question. And today we're going to be looking at questions in therapy.
Counselling Skills with Ken Kelly.
The use of appropriate questioning within the therapeutic relationship. I've used the word appropriate here on purpose. In fact, I want to underline the word appropriate, and I want to put a big red ring around it, and I want to make it slightly bigger than the word questions so that the word appropriate really stands out, because so often questions can be inappropriate. So let's have a look at appropriate questioning, inappropriate questioning. Let's have a look at what questioning can do to derail the empathy within a counselling relationship. And then let's have a look at how questions can be appropriately used to enhance the relationship and deepen the relational depth with the client. So first of all, if we're covering questions, they covered usually pretty early on in counselling training. I cover questioning with my level 2 learners. That's the introduction to counselling, the counselling concepts, as it were. And what I do when I cover questions is, yes, I cover the little bit of theory that I'm going to cover with you now, but I give them a warning is a good way, that this is to be used only when 100% necessary. And very often, questions are not necessary. Now, I have to say that I am speaking from a person-centered base here. So it may well be that in other models, questions that delve into, that explore, that expand on certain elements of the narrative that the client is bringing are encouraged and are appropriate. But if we're looking at the person-centered approach to counselling, we're saying that the client is the expert. This is what Rogers tells us. It's not for us to guide the client. It's for the client to guide us and for us to walk with them in their subjective reality. That is the empathic bond that we have with this client. If we ask a question that is for our knowledge, for us to kind of get a better understanding or to find out something about what the client is bringing, something deeper within the story, that is our agenda. We're setting the agenda. All of a sudden, we're asking the questions and the client is answering those questions. So we've got to be really careful that our questions don't set the agenda, that we're allowing the client to set the pace and the agenda and for them to go where they wish to go, even, and this can sometimes be difficult, even when we can see that the meat of what the client needs to work on is right over here. I can see it. It's there. It's massive. And the client is so close to it. Oh, they just need a tiny little nudge and then they'll see it and then they'll realize it. So if we ask the right question, the client is suddenly going to see this massive mound of opportunity for them to grow, because we might feel that we can see it. But hey, this is not our journey. It's the client's journey, and it's for them to find their mound of opportunity. And it may well not be the same one that we see. So by questioning, we're setting an agenda. Inappropriate questioning sets an agenda and it can lead the client. So we need to be very aware that that exists. Here's another thing. When you're asking a question, when you are asked a question, questions are cognitive. And what I mean by that is you answer a question not from an emotional core. You answer a question by looking around in your head, in your mind. You cognitively search for the answer, you find it, and then you bring that information out to the person who was asked the question. Now here's the thing, within counselling, we're looking to touch on the emotion. We're looking to submerge ourselves in the emotion, the pain, the distress, the discomfort that is counselling. We recognize that it's a difficult journey for counsellor and for clients, and we're there with them in that difficulty, no matter how scary that may be, so that they don't have to go alone. If we ask a question, it is likely to take the client straight out of that emotional bath of richness and put them right into their head, where they cognitively search and look for the answer and bring it to you. It's almost like there's a disconnect from the emotion when we're asking and answering a question, when we're pondering the question that has been asked. I'm looking over my memories. I'm looking over the narrative or the story, rather than the emotions and the depth that we can work at in counsellors. So that's another thing to be careful of when you're asking a question, is that it can lead the client away from the emotion. And you can hear this. You can hear this in action by listening to recorded skills sessions. I encourage everyone, record your skills sessions, record your simulated skills sessions while you're learning, and listen to them. And listen what happens when you ask a question. Listen where the client is before you ask the question, what kind of words they're using, what are they describing. Look where a question is used and see, does it drag the client away from the feeling? And very often it does. So that again would be inappropriate questioning. Questioning maybe where we are looking to expand our knowledge of the counsellor, where we're looking to lead, where we're looking to gain more insight into something, as opposed to just being okay to go with the client where they lead us. So what would be appropriate questioning? Rogers reckons that we don't need to ask questions other than to clarify our understanding. And I think this is pure genius. And I love Rogers more and more the more I study his work. If we are to have that empathic bond, and empathy is being there within the client's frame of reference, then we need to know that we've got the frame of reference correct. We need to know we've got it right. And if we're not sure, we need to clarify. And the way we clarify is we ask a question to clarify that we understand it correctly. If we're asking a question in that kind of a situation, when it's not our agenda, we're not bringing our agenda in, we're just trying hard to be in the frame of reference of the client, and we're going to be bringing their words within the question. So I've got an example of that. If that sounds a little bit foggy, here's an example of where a question is used to clarify, and have a listen. Have a listen how the clarification actually, the question and the clarification actually deepens where the client goes, and the client starts using a lot more feeling words. Let's have a listen to that now.
It feels, when it is for my own gain or my own wants and my own pleasing, I guess, It really feels selfish.
I wonder if I can check with you just so that I can fully understand the word selfish as you see it and feel it. What does selfish mean to you?
My interpretation of it is very much for self-gain and self-pleasure, I guess, wanting my own way.
Notice how the client's tone of voice changes. When I ask the question, the tone of voice of this client almost goes sing-songy. She kind of, my interpretation is it's kind of for self-gain. Listen to that. It's really important. You can hear that the client has been kind of moved from being maybe in an emotional place into being in a cognitive place, as we spoke about earlier. She's answering a question for me. She uses a few different ways to kind of explain that question to me, to explain what that feeling is for her. But then notice, because this is 100% from her frame of reference, it doesn't take very long before she uses the I feel word again. And then notice after the I feel word, how her tone of voice changes and how you find this client now deeply exploring this word selfish. So the question became an invite. It clarified for me so that I could understand the client's frame of reference, but it was an invite to examine that word deeper.
It really feels selfish.
I wonder if I can check with you just so that I can fully understand the word selfish as you see it and feel it. What does selfish mean to you?
My interpretation of it is very much for self-gain and self-pleasure, I guess, wanting my own way, and in a context where maybe in a family situation and choices arise and all that, if I was to push my own wishes or my wants, it just feels so closed off. Not being able to incorporate, and I guess going through this, I guess the expression of what I would want and need doesn't ultimately mean that is what's going to end up happening. However, I feel that if I was to express my own wants and needs, that I would somehow get the insisting that it follows what I want and need. And that's not always, I guess, true in every situation. Maybe sometimes, and it may be not. But that fear, the fear, I guess, for having someone else not have their want and need mentioned or met in exchange for mine, just it feels like an unfair trade. I don't know. I would rather it be someone else's wishes and I'd go along with theirs, and I don't know where that comes from. It's just the way it feels for me.
So there the question was to clarify the meaning of the word selfish so that I could really be within that client's frame of reference. And look how deep the client goes in examining that. And very shortly after the question is asked, the client is using words like I feel, which just gives that indication that the client is back within those feelings. So clarifying so that you're in the frame of reference of the client is an appropriate use of questions. So two kinds of questions that we come up with in a counselling relationship. The one is called a closed question, and a closed question is a question that has a yes or no answer. These should be avoided. A yes or no answer kind of stops everything dead. It's almost like a stall. So we don't want to be asking a closed question that only has a yes or no answer. We want to be using what is called an open question, and an open question is where we ask the client to elaborate or clarify something, because that doesn't have a yes or no answer. So if I was to say, just so that I can truly understand, what is your understanding of the word selfish to you? You can't say yes or no to that. You need to clarify. You need to delve in. You need to go deep within that. So there's just a surface view of questioning, and I guess if anything is coming through loud and clear here, it is more that I tend to use questioning very sparingly where I can. This is not about me, it's about you, and it's about your practice. I highly recommend record, listen to, and see what questions are doing. Are they working for you? When they do work, why did they work? If they didn't work, why didn't they work? And refine how you ask questions. If you find yourself in sessions bombarding the client with question upon question, why do you think you did that? Try to move away from that. That is inappropriate use of questions, and it can be really damaging, and it stops relational depth building as the client just stays in that cognitive plane. So what can we use instead of questions when we don't know? Well, we can use a reflection. If the client brought something and we were unsure about it. So I'll give you an example of something where I would need to ask a question to get clarification. If a client was bringing something and the client was speaking about his brother and his father, and he said, I really struggle with my brother and my father. They don't get on, and at times he makes me so angry. He makes me so angry. Well, I don't know who he is. I don't know who he is. It may be the brother, and it may be the father, because he was bringing both of them. So now I'm unsure. So I cannot be fully within the client's frame of reference because I don't know who he's talking about. Is he angry at the father? Is he angry at the brother? So there I could say, well, sorry, just so I can understand, who is it that you're angry at, your father or your brother? I can see that client being ripped out of that emotion of the anger at the person he's angry at and being, oh, sorry, yeah, let me satisfy your frame of reference, Mr. Counselor. I'm actually talking about my father. So what's another way we can do that? How about if we just do a reflection? How about if the client says, he makes me so angry, and we go, he makes you so angry. We reflect that back. It may be the invite that the client needs to expand on that and say, yes, ever since I was a young boy, my dad was always but I'm now there. It's the dad. I'm there. I didn't need to ask a question. We're still in the feelings, and I've got what I needed to be in the client's frame of reference without having to ask a question. If the client didn't go there and said, yeah, no, he does. He makes me really angry. In fact, so angry, I don't know what to do about it anymore. I may need to then put in a question because I need to get into that client's frame of reference. Is this your dad or your brother that you're referring to? Just so we can get into that frame of reference. The appropriate use of questions, inappropriate use of questions. Examine and question the questions that you ask within your therapy.
Well, Ken, just listening to that and the use of questions, it's just so important, isn't it, Ken? That's a closed question, isn't it?
It is. And questions, as you've heard, they can really disrupt the client. When it's from your own frame of reference as a therapist, you can rip them right out of where they're at by asking them a question and put them onto your agenda. So I guess it's about asking questions that are respectful to where the client is at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And it does link into that phenomenological view of the people have of themselves.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Ask Ken and Rory. And, in the Vibrant Facebook feed, there's a question came up, and it's just this morning, actually. And it's by Jill Fox, and she says that she's on a BACP-accredited course, or was, and this is the crux of the matter, at a college in Manchester, and that the college has lost their BACP accreditation. And she says, does anyone have any advice? So this is a perennial discussion that I have. Usually can, round about May, when people are looking for courses.
Yeah.
Is a BACP accredited course any better than a course that isn't BACP accredited?
And I just want to decode that for anybody that might be listening outside of the UK. I guess if you're in the UK, you're listening to this and we're saying BACP accredited, you're nodding your head and going, this is an interesting topic. May well be. If you're in Canada, as our earlier listener was, you're thinking, what is a BACP? Well, it is basically our ethical body. It is one of the ethical bodies. And it is an ethical body that is gaining, I guess, momentum. And as we step closer to proposed regulation, it's looking like the BACP will be the regulating body for counselling. So they have certain accreditation criteria. And this is about asking, you're on a course, is it BACP accredited? And if it's not, what's the difference if it is or if it isn't?
Oh, yeah. And as I say, I get asked on a regular basis. Well, from my understanding, BACP accredited courses means that the people who run the course ask the BACP to come in, and they have to meet certain criteria, and that includes BACP accredited trainers, staffing levels, hours. I think on a BACP accredited course, it's 450 guided learning hours, and what the kind of discussion in the feed was that the college couldn't provide the staffing to overview and to run an accredited course. They tend to be quite heavily staffed. And in the world of further education at the moment, where we're seeing lots of funding reductions, it's getting harder and harder to have huge staff teams in counselling. Same at universities, to be fair. You know, we've just heard that Strathclyde has disbanded their person-centred training group. And Strathclyde University was a huge university. Mick Cooper was attached to them for a little bit, Professor Mick Cooper. But the question in front of us is what impact does it have?
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you my view. My view is it will have no impact as long as the tutors are. Ken's smiling. I can see Ken on the monitor in front of me smiling. As long as the tutors are qualified, they should be practicing. Really, they should be practicing. The BACP do allude to this, I think, in the new Code of Ethics. And they're delivering the awarding body's criteria. So again, just in case anybody's thinking, what is Rory talking about? When you do a course, you buy a course from an awarding body. My providers are ABC, and they are an educational provider of qualifications. So they give me a specification. I teach to that specification. Every year someone comes in, make sure I've taught to that specification. They sign it off and certificates are released.
Yep.
So, and they have their own criteria about who has to teach. In my case, I did my course many years ago, and the highest qualification at that time was level 3.
Yep.
I recently did my certificate of competence. I went to do my cycling proficiency test. My bicycle clips and ding, 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 ding.
At the BACP, yeah.
And I did it. I knocked it off in around an hour.
Yeah.
And I got a letter through saying, yes, I passed. I have to say that it's not that demanding. If you've been taught properly, then you shouldn't have a problem. And in fact, everybody I've taught commented on kind of how straightforward, I won't use the word easy, straightforward it is. You find private training providers may have BACP accreditation, and the reason for that, if you're a private training provider, you have less kind of other things to spend your money on than a college, because you're just kind of running it for yourself. You don't have to have lots of government legislation. Are they any better? Well, you'd have to ask someone really who'd been to a BACP course. But in my experience, if you've got a good trainer, if you're an awarding body university, I think you'll be all right. What do you think, Ken?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I didn't do a BACP accredited course, and I am now a BACP accredited practitioner. It's about doing the proficiency test. The proficiency test, as Rory alluded to, is not rocket science. If you've been taught well and you are a reflective practitioner, you will be able to get through it without having to do any additional study. But I guess it brings up fear. It brings up apprehension that there's something else that you need to go and do. You shouldn't have a problem with it. You really shouldn't. I guess it's there as a barrier for those that maybe haven't done any training. If they went and did it, they would not get through, because it does ask some ethical questions, and it kind of gets you thinking as in a therapeutic way. But yeah, hopefully that's going to answer that question. I think that's going to have quite a broad reach as well. There's many people out there. I know we've heard that question over and over and over again about courses. Do they match the criteria? You'll be fine. You'll be fine. At the end of the day, you'll be practicing, and very seldom, and in fact, never in my practice has a client ever said to me, did you do a BACP accredited course? It's not what it's about.
Did you ask in that voice?
In that voice.
That kind of voice. Yeah, the only difference is that if you've done a BACP accredited course, you don't have to sit the cycling proficiency test, the BACP proficiency test. And also, when you come to, and this is another confusion, accreditation. People think that you become an accredited counsellor if you've done an accredited Not true. It's two different things, and it's the word accreditation that really kind of confuses here. An accredited course means that when you finish it, you don't have to send in documents to the BACP saying where you trained. Okay, when you do your accreditation to become an accredited therapist, you have to put documents in, and those documents include, for those who have to a BACP accredited course, where you've trained, the awarding body, how many hours you've done, what other courses you've done, that type of thing. So that's the only difference. And of course, if you do an accredited course, you don't have to sit the proficiency test. So I hope that's cleared that up, really.
Yeah, there you go, Jill. Hopefully that's told you. There's a lot of information there. And I just want to apologise if anybody's experienced a slight sound problem with Rory there. I know he's breaking up every now and then. It is because we use the technology of Skype, and our connection is going to be as good as the line is, and maybe there's a cloud floating over somewhere between you and I, Rory, because there are slight breaks there, but it's still coming through. I could understand it, so hopefully you've got what you need out of that. And as we come to the end of today's podcast episode, we want to say thank you to you for lending your ears to this podcast, because without you, it'd just be us rambling to ourselves, I guess, Rory. We value your feedback. We value your iTunes feedback. We're grateful that you listen.
Yes, and really appreciative. 24 5-star reviews on iTunes, Ken. Wow, thank you so much. And it's all down to you, the listener. So thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.